Hey everybody, I regularly get asked a lot of questions about my garden, how I do layout, how I handle certain things, how I set it up, that kind of thing. So, you know, I've decided to actually just make a video giving you guys a tour of the garden and what it looks like and why it's laid out the way it is, and hopefully it can help all of you. Thanks. So, first thing I'll start with is the layout of the garden. I typically do a raised bed style garden. Allows me to contain good soil away from the lawn and that kind of stuff and not have to worry about the weeds in regards to that. And it also allows it to heat up earlier in the spring since it's not in contact with the mass of the cold earth with the residual cold from the winter, so you kind of get a head start in the spring. And I think it just gives you a cleaner layout and that kind of thing because it allows easier to mow the lawn and that kind of thing around it. And right now for these ones I typically just use cheap cedar from Home Depot. And this year for the first time you can actually see I've got straw everywhere protecting the soil. I actually went out and I bought a bale of straw, and that actually has multiple purposes. It shades the soil and keeps the moisture in. It acts as a mulch to keep down the weeds from growing through it, and it decomposes slowly over time, fertilizing the soil. First year I've done it, it's absolutely been a great success. I'm probably watering 3 times, 4 times less than I did in previous years, so it's a big deal. But yeah, all I simply do here is just I've built out some cedar raised beds. I use cedar because it doesn't rot. Just make sure it's not treated with any chemicals because that can seep into the soil. So you got to use untreated lumber. And when I first started these gardens, I usually just used cheap manure, cheap peat moss with the existing soil from down here, tilled into it, and it just fluffed it up into great soil. And every year I just add a bit more compost to it and just improve it every year. In terms of size, I tend to stick to a 4x8 size. The reason being that 8-foot lumber is really abundant, really cheap, and you can, with 3 8-foot boards, you can have it going 8 feet one way, 8 feet the other, and then cut one of them in half to handle the ends. And then with the 4-foot width, it makes it easier to reach into the central part of the garden because you don't have her from either side. You don't have to reach more than 2 feet. So yeah, that's how I handle the dirt and the boxes and that kind of thing. And then a big deal is actually the sun direction. Here in the northern hemisphere, you want to orient your garden south because the sun travels. It's either east to west or west to east. I don't actually remember. But either way, it gives it the maximum amount of light, and you can kind of see how I handle it. I put the tallest in the back, medium in the middle, shortest in the front. Same thing over here. And basically what this creates is effectively a solar panel like that. And that way all the plants get the most optimal light. And like a solar panel, its job is to collect energy. Now in this case, instead of outputting electricity, it outputs food. So yeah, just that alone is probably my number one tip, is just that layout, and making sure to put the tallest things in the back, medium in the middle, and shortest in the front, and just having really good soil because it minimizes watering and fertilizing or anything like that. In terms of layout, I follow a method called square foot gardening, invented by an engineer named Bell Bartholomew. He used to have a show on PBS, I believe in the 70s and 80s. And he kind of engineered this tighter method for use in community gardens in poor areas and in developing countries, so they could raise more food per square foot. And that's kind of what I stick to. It's kind of a de facto standard that most high-density urban gardeners kind of stick to, and that's how I do it. And in my case, I make sure to utilize the surrounding infrastructure here. So in this case, we have a fence. And I've got some cucumbers. As you can see, some cucumbers here and there growing around it, utilizing the fence. And then here I've got some kale. These two here are something that Caribbean people call callaloo. I think in English it's called amaranth. But yeah, I'm going to make some Jamaican dishes with that. Got some bush beans down here in the front. You can actually see them kind of creeping in down there. That's where they are, right down there. And then over here we have some broccoli, and you can actually see a nice head of broccoli coming up there. It's getting there. It should be ready hopefully in the next week or so. And down here some rutabaga, and along the back here we've got a whole great big wall of cherry tomatoes. You can actually see some starting to ripen down there, and I think I saw some over here earlier, the lower ones. Yep, see those yellow ones right there? They're starting to ripen as well. And I build a bamboo structure to hold them up, and I make sure they're very well supported to hold them up in the wind. And I typically prune off any side shoots to grow them vertically, but in the case of these cherry tomatoes, they grow so quickly and so large that I actually prune each plant into two separate main stems. So if you look at these two tall guys right here, are actually both taller than me already, this here and this here are actually the same plant. They just kind of fork off each other. You can see if I can find it right in there. See that fork where they kind of connect in the middle? And that's the same for all of them, the length of this. So each one of these is actually, it looks like it's 16 plants. It's actually 8 cherry tomato plants. And next bed over here, again, similar setup. Solar panel, tall in the back, medium in the middle, short in the front. And in this case, I have a bed of a lot of carrots right here. These will grow great right into the fall. I mean, I'll probably pick these as late as December. They're that cold hardy. And similar to this broccoli over here, this is just the first crop. I'm probably going to plant a second fall crop of it. And again, that'll go right into the cold weather. I'm utilizing the fence here again to this time grow squash up the fence, and it'll end up growing up and covering all of this. I actually had it off to a bad start, and the first ones died because of too much rain earlier, but that's fine. They have the whole summer to grow. I'll get a nice squash crop from that. I've got some leeks here that are filling out. They'll get nice and big and thick by the fall. Got a patch of Swiss chard here. It's a little holy right now. The earwigs got at it when it was young, but I can just raise that right to the ground now. We're getting a little longer in the season, and the earwig population is dying off due to predation from spiders, wasps, that kind of stuff. And I just cut off those holy leaves, give it a good watering, and it'll grow the nice, great big, clean Swiss chard leaves with no earwig holes in it for us to eat. And along the back here, I've got a row of San Marzano plum tomatoes, and they're a little shorter due to their growth habit, and they tend to favor growing fruit a bit more earlier, so that puts a bit more energy into that as opposed to height. But you can see in these ones I've pruned them as a single stem style, and actually gives you a clear view of how I handle supporting them. I actually put a single bamboo stick behind each one, and that in itself is decently strong but not very rigid. And I actually weave other bamboo sticks sideways through them, and you can actually see it goes there it is, inside, outside, inside, and so on, all the way down, and then the opposite going that way. And it creates a very rigid structure that is very, very, very solid. And then I just build out a kind of a lateral little thing to stop the back and forth movement here. And that's probably the most important thing, because the wind will blow it back and forth, and that wiggles the sticks out of the ground eventually, and kind of builds up a bigger hole. So this little side stick here is what saves the whole thing from falling over and working itself out over time. So yeah, those are my two main beds there, and I've got some chives here in an old Corona bucket, the ones they used to hand out at well, they still do hand out at bars you can get on the patio. And I've got some mint here. They're just hiding in the shade there because they don't like the sunlight too much. Oh, and there's the leftovers of my hay. I end up using only about 1/3 of the bale to mulch all these garden beds. So didn't think it would go that far, but well worth the money. Over here we have the zucchini section, and as you can see, they are gigantic this year. I don't plant them in the regular beds here because of the sheer amount of space they take up. They would put too much pressure on the other plants. I plant them in a bed next to the drainage thing here for the window well, and the grass here, so it has room to spread out and it's not pushing on any other vegetable plants. You can see they've growing very well, and I've mulched it down in there with hay as well, and again, great success. And you can see the little zucchinis are and the flowers everywhere are popping up, and I think you can see some little zucchinis popping up here, but this is probably the largest I've ever had them grow. They are just absolutely, let me just get a better look at that one, huge in size, the leaves here. So been a great success for that. And here's another bed here next to the house, and again, tall in the back, medium in the middle, short in the front, and south is that way. Trying to build that solar panel that absorbs light and creates food. So this row here is all the heirloom tomatoes. These are varieties that are centuries old, and they are typically optimized for flavor, not so much production or aesthetics. So you get a lot of really, really good tasting, ugly tomatoes. And they have a very different growth habit and can be a little tricky. They tend to be a lot more forky and hard to deal with, and sometimes you get a little weirdness like that. And you know, they tend to split and not have true suckers like the other tomatoes back there have. So they can be a bit harder to prune, and you don't get as much, but it tastes incredible. Here you can see I've got a row of peppers, and this is about the only time you'll actually use a tomato cage, because tomato cages actually won't work well with tomatoes, because as you can see, I mean, it's mid-July, and they've already outgrown the height of those tomato cages. So you can imagine, again, similar for over here, you can't contain that in these little things. So tomato cages are best used for peppers and eggplants, not for actual tomatoes. And in my little short section here, I've got some onions growing along the front here, and I've actually split them. It's kind of hard to tell, but the ones on the right here are larger than the ones on the left because they were planted earlier, so I could have an earlier crop and not get them all at once. Moving along here, we've got some stuff in pots. This is a patio style tomato. It's a cultivar that's meant to be grown in pots. You can see it's growing very well here. Some chilies, and you would think what you might pay for chili peppers in the store. Look how productive one little plant can be. This is mojito mint. It's the Caribbean style mint used in mojitos, so great for drinks. And here we got another little section here. We've got some snow peas growing in the back there. They're going to go for a bit longer, and the plant itself will just put so much energy into the snow pea production that it'll just keel over dead. At that point, I'll just plant more snow peas for the fall. And these are actually cauliflower plants. You can't see the cauliflower right now on these four because they still haven't produced it, but this middle one is beginning to produce a head. And I actually have to wrap a rubber band around it and protect the head from sunlight. But you can kind of see it starting to form down in there. And it's a little dirty right now, but that should clean up good. And yeah, we got to protect that from sunlight so it doesn't go green or anything like that. And hopefully these will produce well soon in the future as well. And then you come over here and you've got the herb bed. This is where we get all the tasty flavor. Now I position this next to the house as close as possible because that way you can come out from the kitchen and pick what you need. And I've kind of divided it into two sides. This side here on the right is the perennial side, and this is the annual side. So a lot of herbs come back every year from their roots, and that includes thyme, sage, and oregano. So I obviously don't want to be digging up their root system when I'm planting annuals, so I kind of take them on one side or the other, and this stuff comes back every year. And over here on the annual side, I've got some flat leaf parsley, a lot. Beautiful crop of basil this year. It's been a great year for basil. And back here I did have a lot of dill growing and a lot of cilantro, but it got too old too quick and started to flower, which would ruin the flavor. Typically those things you got to do probably about 3 crops a year of those because how quickly they flower and lose their flavor. So I've ripped them out and I've planted new ones. You can actually see the new fresh layer of cilantro coming up down there. And I've actually got a volunteer dill seed that worked its way over there somehow. So I do have a good tasty dill plant there. And down here I've got some rosemary. And if you're gonna, start out trying to grow your own food, I think herbs are usually a good spot to start because of what they charge for fresh herbs at the store. This branch, say, that much is a couple dollars just for a few sticks of that at the store, and a lot of times it's not even product of Canada. It's brought in from South America or something, some other place like that, and so there's a lot of concerns there in terms of just freshness or just even food safety. You don't know how clean it is. So growing it yourself, you can rest assured that it's safe. And yeah, you can save a ton of money like that. So that's it. That's my garden. That's more of it along the house here. And that's the rest of it there. Like I said, pretty simple. Good dirt. And slope it like a solar panel. And before you know it, you're eating good. Thanks, guys.